Cassandra. So today we're talking about the off-season playbook. Now this is for instructional coach or instructional leaders, but it kind of corresponds to athletes, right? Great athletes understand that championships aren't won during the season, right? They're won in the off-season. So the same is true for instructional coaches or instructional leaders, right? We know the school year is filled with so many responding, we troubleshoot, and we're supporting like immediate needs that are necessary in the classroom. But the summer gives us that opportunity to kind of take a step back, think strategically, and start to build those systems that will create impact throughout the year. So that's what this is how do we maximize that opportunity? Okay, low key, in the school year, we're actually surviving. So this is like, what does it take to go from surviving to designing? So we know many of coaches pretty much spend their days either reacting to challenges as they see that come up. The summer really offers them that that change, something different, to provide space to kind of move from like the immediate now to kind of redesigning the work. And instead of what, we tend to do is like put out fires, we can, during the summer, build that architecture that needs to be proactive and prevent that, right? This gives us that opportunity to be very intentional and mindful about our systems rather than go into the new year with just responding to our circumstances. Okay, so I think of it as a cyclical, right? What is the architecture of like a coach's summer, right? An effective summer, right? But this is just my summer, bounces kind of these 4 buckets, these 4 areas. How do you restore? Because burnout, coaches are often burnout. We are always supporting teachers. The second piece is kind of strategic planning, pretty much deciding where your efforts are going to be, where can you create the greatest impact. Third, of course, professional development, professional learning, investing in our own growth and going to training. And then fourth is, what do we need to do to nurture those relationships? And how do we strengthen the connections with our new teachers as well as the veteran teachers, right? And that's pretty much what makes coaching so successful in schools. The strongest coaches are very intentional about these 4 buckets and how to invest in our time. All right, now, if you're a new coach, there needs to be some type of clarity, right? Before we actually dive in to make these plans. So many times you'll see that coaches become everything for everyone, like putting out fires, emergency, flash, flash, flash. But, really being very intentional, even as instructional leaders and principals, starting with understanding what the role is, what is the role, and what it isn't. And so being very intentional about like our work centers on supporting MTSS efforts, redesigning professional learning around that, analyzing data, and pretty much facilitating that instructional improvement. And so when we have clarity in the role, our time and energy becomes directed towards this high impact work. Okay, one of the most productive things you can do is step away, right? For the summer is rest, not partial rest. You need to rest. Many times educators as well as coaches as well as instructional leaders feel so guilty about stepping away, but recovery is not a luxury. It is your responsibility to your temple, yourself. And so being able to set those boundaries, disconnect from work, and taking very intentional breaks allows us to return with this renewed set of energy, right? This creativity, excitement, and focus for the year. So I think many new coaches as well as instructional leaders struggle with, being able to narrow our focus. So thinking about how can you narrow your focus? So of course, I've told this to leaders, many initiatives fail because we try to improve so many things at once. And if everything is kind of a priority, then nothing is a priority. So instead of targeting kind of these 10 different instructional practices, try to prioritize 1 to 2 high leverage areas that pretty much align with the district goals as well as students' needs, right? And then this focus creates that momentum, and the momentum will create results, and you're able to see the results in the data that you keep. All right, so this is kind of my blueprint for this coaching environment. So the summer is a perfect time to rebuild this infrastructure, thinking of how do you make coaching a little easier during the school year, being able to organize your digital products, your digital resources, redesign your spaces, right? Create data collection tools, as well as some of us are still, data collecting on walls, visuals are very great, and establish your communication systems with the people that you serve. Every hour spent on these systems now can save you so much time and hours, and this will in turn reflect on you being able to increase the consistency of your work and effectiveness. Okay, so this is the kind of hard part for some leaders, and so some instructional coaches, is kind of what is this alignment conversation that needs to be had. It's one of the most important conversations a coach can have before the school year begins is with their leadership. And so being able to create alignment, it creates clarity as well as trust, as well as like a focus. Like both of your eyes are on the prize. Like together, we're working together. We're reviewing student outcomes. We're identifying priorities. We have identified what that looks like. We've designed we define what the instructional shift that we want to make together. We've also determined how coaching will support these goals. And when principals and coaches are aligned, oh my God, I've seen golden things happen, and the entire school benefits from this. Okay, and so there is this kind of professional learning arc. At the beginning of the year, usually it's great and it's planned. And at the end of the year, it's like, well, whatever title money pays for, whatever we're trying to kind of get in. So I think, when you think about summer professional learning, it must be intentional, right? So think about your learning in like these 3 different ways. What do you need to learn personally? What curriculum initiatives require a deeper level of just understanding? And then what facilitation skills do you need to kind of help lead your adult learners more effectively? Things are changing. And so how are you changing with the times? And so professional growth, of course, should be directly connected to kind of this impact that you want to create. And I can't say that this is not a big deal, because it is a big deal. Being able to build relationships, which is the foundation of any coaching session. Teachers pretty much don't buy into any strategies, anything you're saying before they've bought into the relationship you have with them and the trust that you've built. And so summer gives us that opportunity to do our research, to get to know the teachers, to understand how teachers are as learners and who can help you build that momentum, right? The goal is to, of course, enter the school year helping as partners, and that takes a lot of relationship building. Now, this is a big one because you have to justify your worth, right? How do you measure your impact? Many times we kind of decide that at the end of the year, like, oh, well, I helped this teacher and write in my evaluation to submit it, right? But really thinking about your evidence starting from the beginning and what you've done to nurture relationships, right? And we think about, beginning with the end in mind, decide what data matters, right, from the district and leadership, right, and student data, and how are you going to collect it? How are you going to track it? How are you going to monitor the progress throughout the year? What systems can you create going in before? Maybe you've created a digital dashboard. I've done that many times based on some of our goals. And so being able to share my story through data, that's the story that I tell later because I've been tracking it through time. All right, so now that's the end, right? You are off. This is the time. Everything kind of just talks about this one big idea. The off-season matters. The choice we make during the summer and the influence, which influences the success of the school year.